Is homeschooling a gateway drug? I'm going to break it down for you.
Hey kid, want to try something awesome?
Mom?
I got some freedom for you right here. Want to try it?
I'm Emily Fort with the Homeschool Freedom Coalition. I was out for lunch a few days ago with one of the folks here on our team, and we're actually sitting in Chipotle having a salad, and I'm just like, I wish people could see what a gateway drug homeschooling is. And, and she looked shocked. Like, most people don't refer to homeschooling in those terms. But I went through it and she said, Emily, you should just cut a video on this. And so that's what this video is about, especially because I'm cutting this video at the end of July, very end of July. And a lot of families are choosing right now. Many have already filled out their paperwork for government school for the fall, but they're going, not really wanting to do this. Last year didn't go great. They're promising things will be way better this year, but they've promised that before, and we haven't really seen much of the change they've promised. So I wanted to kind of explain how I view homeschooling as something of a gateway. My poor video editor is going to be like, how many times are you going to say the word in this thing, Emily? But I do think if you're in that boat, either you're not, maybe you haven't filled out the paperwork and you have a, rising 5-year-old and a 3-year-old, and you're kind of deciding which way is our family going to go in this cultural divide. There's a choice to make here. And I just want to explain what I think. Keep in mind, if you haven't seen my videos before, I was homeschooled my whole life. I'm one of 11 kids. All of us were homeschooled our whole lives. I have 45 or 6 or 47. I'm not sure how many nieces and nephews, all of whom are homeschooling if they're old enough or have already graduated from homeschooling. I also worked 10 years for a homeschool curriculum company, traveled all over the country to homeschool conventions and workshops and did the whole thing. And I've talked to tens of thousands of homeschoolers on the phone one at a time. So I'm very, very, very familiar with some of the long-term effects that homeschooling can have, as well as what happens if you make the other choice, and that is your choice. So you get to decide. But from my perspective, let me lay out some things that happen if you're making that decision about putting them back on the bus or putting them on the bus for the first time. What I have seen happen is the number one thing I would say that homeschooling leads to is just by default, you get stronger family relationships. And if you think about it, when you put your 5-year-old on a bus, they're not spending any time, during the day, 8 hours or whatever, with their 3-year-old sibling anymore. And extrapolate that out. Pretty soon, we're going to this middle school over here, and the younger one's going to that elementary school over there. They're literally spending no time together. And when they are spending time with other kids, it's entirely kids their own age. So they lose touch of how to actually relate to younger siblings, older siblings. Those family relationships, that sort of like difficulty, that obstacle is never placed in the picture when you homeschool. Your kids are going to spend all day together. And yes, that's going to mean some extra training and extra parenting to work out those things. But then in return, you get thousands of hours, thousands and thousands, 15,000 hours if you homeschool K to 12 of time spent together, shared experiences, shared adventures, shared movies, shared family trips, things that you can do during the school year, like family vacations. My family plans to take one. We take one every September because the weather is still nice. The water is still warm enough to swim in, and everybody else has gone back to school. So we get, kind of our family vacation in September, lower crowds, cheaper prices. If you're not doing this already, you should be. And so think of all those extra experiences and hours and times and shared memories and family traditions that become just part of the routine of your life. So the number one thing that I would say happens when you choose homeschooling is stronger family relationships. The trust bond between mom and dad and their kids is much higher because they haven't swapped out the primary adult of the day multiple times throughout the day, and then every year start with a fresh batch. Mom and dad are a constant, well-attached, positive presence in their life that they deeply trust because they have spent 15,000 extra hours usually by the end of homeschooling at home with either mom or dad or both. And so number one, stronger family relationships. Number two, the number two thing I see families, as a result of homeschooling that end up happening in many families is some financial intentionality. If you're going to choose to homeschool, it usually means somebody's giving up, a second job, mom's come home, or mom's gone to work from home, or mom's gone part-time, or whatever it looks like, it usually means, you know what, we really can't keep doing this loosey-goosey we've been doing. Now that we're a one income home or one and a half, or, we're trying to do things very differently, we're going to really prioritize getting debt free. We're going to really prioritize, buying a home instead of renting. We're going to really prioritize maybe Dave Ramsey, whatever it is. You often see homeschool families really dial in with intentionality on their finances. Now, obviously, other families do too, but it just seems to be, they go hand in hand. Your second year of homeschooling, you're going, hey, this is actually working. We're making it work, and we're happy, and the kids are happy, and yeah, we're not going to Cancun for vacation, but turns out that, getting an Airbnb cabin on a lake, 2 hours from home is just as fun for the kids, and we're willing to make that sacrifice financially, whatever it took, to homeschool, by being more intentional with our finances, and that often pays off long term. That intentionality usually looks like a closer eye on the budget, maybe a more forward-thinking view about how we're going to keep doing this year after year. And so that would be the second thing, is financial intentionality seems to come hand in hand with the decision to homeschool. And this third one, this is like, I don't know that everybody saw this coming, but the third thing that I would say goes hand in hand with starting homeschooling, or seems to come right down the road. Once you've decided to homeschool, you usually get better family relationships, you get a little different financial priorities, and then like the health of your family becomes like a different thing. All of a sudden, homeschool moms, either because they have the time or they can actually notice patterns in their kids, because they have total control of what they're eating and when they're sleeping and all of that. They're not eating other kids' stuff at lunch. They're not eating the highly processed food at the lunch line. Homeschool moms often end up researching everything from, the quality of food, making homemade food. How many homeschool moms aren't making and selling sourdough right now? Like, if that's you, say it in the comments, because I probably know 10 women that are selling sourdough right now as their side gig, and they're loving it, and their kids are loving it. So it could be making sourdough. It's prioritizing sleep and the developing brain of young kids, which we know now, they don't thrive the way the current school system is set up. Maybe it's screens and how harmful they are to young children. Maybe it's, just natural health in general. Oh, you know what? The people who told me it took an expert to educate my kids were wrong, and maybe they're wrong. Those same experts are wrong about food dye or this latest suggested medical intervention. Maybe it doesn't take all of this system to keep my kids healthy if I just remove the kind of socially accepted food sources that kids are just supposed to eat. I don't know 10 homeschool families that aren't focused on this, where the moms aren't thinking about this and talking about this and researching this. And of course, moms that don't homeschool are also, it's not just homeschool moms, but it seems to be, there's a huge overlap there. And in fact, the Make America Healthy Again mamas, the MAHA mamas, they could easily argue that they are a gateway into homeschooling. They're a gateway into homeschooling, where people who are really prioritizing the MAHA lifestyle, they realize very quickly, if I'm going to really live this out, the school system really isn't conducive to living this out. Because part of what the MAHA mommies realize is my kids need more sunshine. They need more time outdoors. They need more time touching dirt so their microbiome is healthy. They need more time, climbing trees to get, vestibular integration in their brains. Like the MAHA mommies are coming into homeschooling and saying, we're homeschooling not because of worldview or anything really wrong. My kid's not necessarily being beaten up and maybe their teacher loved them. But my kid was being constantly exposed and tempted by food dyes by all the kids around him. And my kid was, being diagnosed with, a disorder because he was basically being, tied to a chair for 8 hours a day at 6 years old. And they wanted me to medicate him. Like the MAHA mommies are a gateway into homeschooling and vice versa, where a lot of people come into homeschooling all of a sudden start realizing, hey, a lot of the stuff they told us was normal for kids is actually just a symptom of the food we're eating or the environmental stuff around us or being stuck in a chair 8 hours a day with a 15-minute recess. So I would say that the number 3 thing that can happen when you start homeschooling is this focus on health and wellness in your family. All of a sudden, that can be a bigger priority. Mom has more time to make food from scratch, more time to research these things. Again, when you're a closed system, you have more control over, what impacts your kids' behavior, because A, you're there to see all of it, and B, you're the inputs. You're deciding what they're eating instead of the school lunch lady or the kid sitting next to them, even if you pack their lunch. And so that's the third thing. I think the fourth thing I would talk about would be like a spiritual, I don't know what to call it, but like a seriousness about spiritual matters. It's very easy in the school system to just pretend that materialism and, the empirical world around us, the tangible things we can see, smell, and touch, are the only things that are real. Well, when you pull out of that system and you come into homeschooling, it's a lot easier to really allow your kids to see your faith. And so if you are a Christian who homeschools or who is currently, considering government school or currently in government school, your kids' experience with your faith, everybody says more is caught than taught, and, your kids are going to do what you do, not what you say, right? Well, if they see you reading the Bible before we start school every day, if they see you prioritizing memorization of scripture, and they see, memorizing hymns maybe, or, those sorts of things, when they see that all of, especially if your curriculum textbooks are Christian curriculum, and those curriculum are often written intentionally to show how all the world, every aspect of reality is impacted by your faith and your worldview. And so when you move to that sort of curriculum and worldview, all of a sudden the faith that you already held is on way better display for your kids. And it becomes, as natural as breathing, because it's affecting every subject. It comes up every day, multiple times. Even if you're not having time for family worship in the evenings, by homeschooling, you're able to work that in at a foundational worldview defining level. And it's like, there's no amount of Sunday school. Let me say this again. There is no amount of Sunday school on the planet that is going to make up for 8 hours a day, 5 days a week of secular, secular humanistic worldview training. There is no 1 hour, there's no VBS, there's no snacks and games and pizza and Christian movie that's ever going to begin to tear down the foundation of the secular thinking that they've been given starting at 5 years old. On the reverse, it's a lot harder for the other side, the secular side, to tear down the foundation you're building when you put that 8 to 10 hours a day. I mean, honestly, we know homeschooling only takes a couple of hours, but still, when their foundational way of looking at the world is through the lens of the parents' Christian faith, that foundation is a lot sturdier as well. And so, on the one hand, I would say, you're not going to undo 15,000 hours of secular government training with a few hours of Sunday school and a month and 1 week of VBS in the summer. It's just not going to cut it. On the other hand, they're not going to be able to assail your child's faith as easily when your child has had hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours of a worldview training, integrated into all of their curriculum. So it's a double win if you're interested or concerned about the spiritual state of your children, which I think, almost all parents would say they want their kids to be happy and healthy. But for Christian parents, especially, that includes happy, healthy, and loving and following the Lord. And that can become so much easier when it's just built into the daily structure of your family. And so I would say that's probably the fourth thing. Gosh, I could probably make 20 of these. I could probably make this video like 8 times over. I think I touched on this a minute ago, and this is probably just my pet topic, but I'm going to throw it out there and hopefully you're willing to put up with it. I would say that people who are homeschooled in general are more skeptical of societal norms. And so what that looks like is, again, I touched on it in the health one, but if you're willing to recognize that the experts were just absolutely dead wrong about education after a couple years of homeschooling, you can't miss it. It's unmissable that everything they said about homeschoolers are going to fail and they need to be socialized. And, it's like, oh, even if if you can recognize that everything they told you trying to gaslight you and scare you out of homeschooling was total nonsense, and it's really just to protect a nearly $1 trillion industry, $1 trillion a year industry in America that is not delivering what it's promised and is making, unsocialized kids who are very miserable. And they always, that was the boogeyman of homeschooling was, oh, you're going to get those kids home and they're going to be unsocialized and they'll be just miserable. And it's like, I don't know, man. Like, I'm seeing the other way. But if you recognize that was all bogus, it's very easy to go, hey, turns out that maybe some of the stuff they're telling me to feed my kids is also bogus. And once you start seeing through that, you start to go, is college really like needed for everybody in every situation? Is there a faster, cheaper, more efficient way to get where I want my kid to go? And all sorts of social institutions and cultural institutions, things that you've just always respected and held in high esteem because you were educated in their system. You start to go, hey, you know what? I don't need my kids to be cool and to fit in and to, be the quarterback on the football team. I really just want my kids to have, a hard work ethic, to be honest, to be caring, to be, to get married and have kids. And I really don't need my daughters to go, sleep with 20 people before they settle down, at 35 and have 6 cats. I actually might want my daughter to think it's normal to get married and have kids and raise babies. And if they want to work, fine. But I don't want to teach my kids these cultural norms that are actually not necessarily the right thing for our family. Similarly, I'm not going to teach my son that he should sleep with 20 people and, be a playboy and spend all of his 20s, doing and drinking and partying and waking up at 35 and going, well, shoot, I've blown tens of thousands of dollars. I haven't built anything of any value or legacy. The economy is now at this point, gutting all the young people anyway. Maybe that college degree that I paid $80,000 for, for a degree in marketing that then I went to party all my 20s away. Gosh, son, let me tell you, that's not a life path I want you to follow. And I'm willing to step outside that system and go, hey, I know that's what the culture says is normal. I know that's what they say is fun and everyone needs their time to do these things. But son, if you buckle in, if you dial in now and you start at 19 years old, with your head down, you're going to work, you're going to save, you're going to get married, you're going to have kids, you're going to try to buy a home, you're going to build a business. Let me show you what's possible in this countercultural world. You don't need to sleep with 50 people. You don't need to party and spend tens of thousands of dollars enriching, the local hangout clubs and the guy at the vape shop. You don't need to do these things. You don't need to spend all day on your phone. We can make a totally countercultural family decision outside of that system. And so I think if nothing else, once you start doing that, there's all sorts of politically countercultural things you can get into. And it's like, hey, you know what? It really isn't okay that they want to tell us all what to do all the time. I really am not okay, personally, Emily, I am not okay with my tax dollars funding the school system down the road that is, brainwashing the kids there to hate Christianity and hate their parents and hate America. I mean, I'm closed-minded like that. I'm not cool with it. I'll never be cool with it. There's nothing they can do to make me cool with it. And so that is an independence of the mind that I got from homeschooling. I will never be okay with some of the stuff that they are pushing on us as normal. I don't like flock cameras. I don't like the whole narrative of you have nothing to hide, you have nothing to worry about. I've read too much history. That's a perk of being homeschooled. And I didn't just read the top 4 history items in a decade they told me were important. I have read this is about 10%, maybe 20% of our family library. I have read, hundreds of thousands of pages of history, and I'm not going to fall for this stuff. And when the stuff rolled out 6 years ago, we didn't fall for that either. A lot of homeschoolers I know were out there saying, hey, these people are liars. We don't trust the media, remember? These people are liars. We don't trust them. The experts in education have been wrong. The medical experts have been wrong. And you saw a lot of homeschoolers, especially friends of mine. I knew a lot of folks personally that were very vocal and, worked hard to undo some of the stuff that happened or to stop some of that stuff from happening. And I believe that strength of mind, that independent streak, if you will, I believe that comes from homeschooling. I have never cared what all of them think. I don't care. And I know many other homeschoolers like me. These are like freedom fighting mothers. I know these mamas that dude, if you get them in a room, they can freaking change the world. And I believe that comes from, I've rejected the system, I've rejected their cultural norms, I've rejected their institutions. I am out here freewheeling and I don't give a hoot what they think. And that strength of mind, if you can get that for your kids, that's the fifth thing I would say. That is a long-term benefit of homeschooling that is maybe not visible on the front end of deciding to homeschool. And in my opinion, that's my favorite. That's my absolute favorite. I have prayed since before I had children that they would be strong people, able to work in God's kingdom and not bow down in fear to any man or any institution or any power on this earth, that they would bow only to Jesus Christ. And if you can prioritize that in your family, if you can accomplish that, there isn't a thing on this earth I would not give up to have my children get to that place. And so that's, to summarize, this is a long video. I know I'm going to have to chop it up because nobody has 20 minutes to listen to this. But I would say that's probably the biggest thing that important to me, but maybe not to everybody. But it is a long-term thing that you see with homeschoolers. Is very common that they end up going, hey, you know what? They told us we were crazy for homeschooling. They told us we're crazy for, eating this way or not having this medical procedure. They told us we were crazy for being debt-free, and they told us we're crazy for not sleeping around, and they told us all this stuff was nuts, and it's actually worked out super, super freaking awesome. And so I would just say that is, if you're on the fence, if you're not sure about homeschooling, if you're in that position of I have a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old and we're expecting a baby and I'm not sure, or if you're like, hey, it's been really rough at school the last few years and we're not sure this is even a good fit for us anymore, say something in the comments. There are people following our page, the staff here. They will get in the comments and they will help you. Like if you are considering it and you have questions, we'll call you. We'll get on the phone. Like we don't care. We are so committed. It's not going to be, there's no charge for any of this. Like we're not here to you're going to pay me $30 to give you my advice. You get on the comments, and if you need help, somebody here will reach out to you. We will help you. We will get you connected with people locally if we're able, and we will start to build a network of homeschool families that are, hopefully end up in all these places. They use the gateway of homeschooling, and they get all these things for their family. That's really what we're all about. So thank you very much for your time. I'm Emily Fort with the Homeschool Freedom Coalition. In the meantime, stay free, stay the course.